Welcome to Beverages, Bites, and Banter. This is a brand new show where Spencer and I talk about the most important things in life. Things like our families and life lessons. Things like the latest tech trends that we're geeking out over. Things like Spencer's new adventures in art. Basically, almost anything's fair game, but we're always going to have some amazing beverages to discuss. And most of the time, we'll also have special guests join us on the show. But for today, it's just you and me and Spencer. So in case you didn't know, and why would you? I'm Jim Hirschauer. I've been in the tech world for way too many years in way too many different roles. And this is my good friend, Spencer Schwab, who also spent far too much time in the tech world. Spencer, buddy, how you doing?
Hey, Jim. Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. What you drinking today? That's one of the most important
That's
questions I have for
always
you.
a great question. I am drinking a delicious cup of coffee
Yeah, what kind of coffee you got?
from this one's from Beacon. It's actually a bourbon. It's called La Fani is the farm it comes from. So it's from El Salvador. Not quite
Beacon.
my favorite region. I prefer a Guatemala, but definitely it's quite delicious.
Tell me more about Beacon. Who's Beacon?
So Beacon Coffee started by a guy named John who used to roast for some of the big producers up in Seattle, and they kept burning the coffee. So he started his own place down in Ventura, California, where I used to live. So they're by the beach roasting small batch coffee. Him and his wife travel to source and visit the farmers and pay them above fair value and just get some of the most remarkable beans from across the world direct shipped to them. And there was a while I couldn't drink, and we'll talk about that in another episode, but I found my love, like fine wine, in single origin coffees.
Very cool. Yeah. It seems like there's a big market for over roasted coffee, that burnt coffee you were talking about.
Really large. I think it might have something to do with the marketing and the kind service behind it, but yes.
Maybe. And the really delicious, like sugary drinks that they make out of that over roasted stuff.
Oh,
They're yummy.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just remodeled one of those in our grocery store, and they're having like $2 medium-sized drinks right now, and yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah. I haven't had that stuff in many years, but I used to drink some here and there. They were really good. Like, I
Yeah,
love the
yeah.
caramel ones. They're really good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I prefer my coffee black right now without anything in it, but man, you start adding that sugar and cream in there, you can just, especially a good single origin, you can really get some crazy flavors. Like a good Ethiopian to me, it's like drinking fruity pebbles.
Yeah, so this is interesting. All right. So we've talked about this before, but I suck at tasting coffee, right? Like I love coffee. I am definitely a coffee snob. But when it comes to, the descriptions that you read of the coffee where it's like, oh, there's stone fruit. First of all, I don't even know what a stone fruit is. Like, I have no idea.
A peach, it's like anything with like a pit in it, like a
Oh,
peach,
okay.
nectarine,
All right. And so like
apricot.
they use all these words to describe the flavors in coffee. And my palate knows that like there's different things going on. Like kind of like when there's African coffee mixed in, there's like some kind of fruitiness or something going on there that my palate
Mhm.
recognizes and I really like. And I like that mixed with some of the dark, like chocolatey type of stuff. But when I read a description on a bag of coffee, I'm like, how do they taste the stuff that's written in there? Because I could never, I can never taste a cup of coffee and say, oh, this tastes like it has hints of these four or five different things. That's just, I get chocolate, no chocolate, fruity, no fruity. And that's about as far as I go.
So you're hitting the big notes, but not the fine ones. Is that
Yeah,
what I'm
apparently I
thinking?
don't have a very refined palate or
Uh,
something. I don't know.
Yeah, because your South Americans are going to taste chocolate like Guatemala. That's what I love about it is it's just chocolate forward. But there's also, like fine wine, different notes in there. I guess I'm blessed with a palate that can taste that. And coffee, whiskey, wine, food. Um, it also takes quite a bit of introspection to try to connect those flavors too. So it's not like it just comes out of nowhere. It takes practice and um, I think for me too, going to different wine tastings in California where I used to live and talking to the winemakers and the people behind the counters and just comparing notes so you can kind of say, oh, yeah, I think I might taste that. So you can, it's a learning process too.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you don't even know what a stone fruit is, like, how are you going to know what the hell it tastes
Yeah, I
like?
didn't know that that's what they called like any fruit with a hard pit like that. Had no clue. So I learned something today. Thank you. Never too old
I
to
put
learn.
this rock in my mouth and it didn't taste very fruity.
Stone soup. You ever heard the stone soup story?
I haven't. I have not.
Okay. Well, we're not going to go in the stone soup story today, but it starts out with stones in water, and it ends up adding a bunch of vegetables. But anyway, that was a story that I used to read to my kids. So on that bag of coffee that you have, does it have tasting notes on it? Does it say what that blend? I think you said it was a blend, or is it
Yeah, no, this is a single
single origin?
origin from the Silva family in El Salvador. It tells me it was grown at 1,490 meters. It was is the natural process of fermentation, and it's a bourbon varietal. So a lot of what we see in America, Arabica beans or Arabica, I can't say it right, but I struggle. But this one's a bourbon variety. I really love a Pacamera or a Geisha variety. Geishas are treats, but Pacamera is probably my favorite bean. That's what I had last week in my
Yeah,
subscription I get from them.
this is interesting, right? So this is an interesting topic. I have a buddy who is a coffee roaster. He lives in Idaho, lives in Sandpoint, Idaho.
Right.
So we're going to get him on the show because you just
Nice.
used a boatload of terms that I know some of them, but not all of them. That's for sure. And I know many other people like probably have no idea what you just said. And then of course some will. So what we need to do is we need to get my buddy Randy. We need to get him on the show. We need to have him talk us through some of these terms and tell us about his coffee business that he runs. It's a great
Yeah, he's
coffee.
got great coffee. I remember you sent me some a few years ago. It was just really good.
Yeah, so we'll try and get him on a show soon. Hopefully, a couple shows down the road here we can get him on for. All right.
Yeah, I guess that kind of leads into how we met and how did we find this love of coffee and
Be,
friendship and
before you get there,
oh,
I've had this glass just sitting here while we've been talking, and it's very
what?
fragrant.
I'm jealous.
It's
It's
very
because it's
fragrant.
later where you're at.
Some nice color there. I don't know if you can see that. There we go. Some nice color.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah,
That's a good brown.
yeah. So
What is that?
this is
It's like a
tequila.
scotch. Oh, that's a
Tequila.
tequila.
This is a Don Julio 1942. Hmm.
Tell
Oh
me
yeah.
more about the notes in that.
Oh my god, it tastes like tequila, but really good tequila. So yeah, this is just a straight glass of tequila. By the way, I put no ice in it. I put nothing in it. I just wanted to taste it.
So tequila neat.
It's tequila.
That means it must be a good tequila.
So 1942. Oh, let me show the bottle here real quick because it's beautiful. First of all, the bottle itself, I know there we go. Don Julio
Yeah,
1942. Anyway, it's a cool looking bottle. This was a present from my wife. My wife is amazing, as you can already see.
to no kidding.
Right? So she gave me that as a Christmas present. And I'm using it very sparingly and taking good sips off of it. And, tequila, like most people, I had stopped drinking tequila for a while because, like, we all have a bad tequila experience with one of those really popular brands of
Well,
tequila that's
yeah,
terrible. And you're like,
yeah, those, we won't name them, but
yeah,
yeah,
and you're like, lick, slam, suck, right? And like 15 to 20 of those later, you're just having a really bad night. It turned from a great night to a difficult evening.
well, that's just it. If you get a good tequila, like a good whiskey, it doesn't usually leave much of a hangover at all. So
Exactly.
it's
I spent the night in San Francisco. I used to go out to San Francisco a lot. Don't live there. Have never lived there, but used to visit a lot for company App Dynamics that you and we met through that company.
never heard of them.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. And me and a guy named TC were out hanging out one night at a Mexican restaurant in San Francisco, and they had Don Julio 1942 on the menu, and it wasn't nearly as expensive then as it is now. It wasn't as popular. And so we're, after dinner, we're just sitting there talking about our work stuff, drinking glasses of Don Julio 1942, and it was amazing. It was a great night. TC's a great guy, by the way. I don't know if you ever met TC, but he's a great guy. And yeah, doesn't really leave a hangover. I mean, of course, if you drink far too much, it's going to hurt. But like all good alcohol, like drink it properly, drink it and enjoy it. Right? We weren't doing shots or anything. So that's how I got introduced to Don Julio 1942, and ever since I've been wanting a bottle. And my wife granted that wish this Christmas.
You took care of it.
Yeah,
Oh, this Christmas even. Wow,
it was
that's
this
fresh.
Christmas. Yeah. So cool. Let's talk about how we met, since you just brought that up. We met at a company called App Dynamics again. That I was
Mm,
working for them, and
but I was
you
not.
were not. You were a customer of the company. So why don't you talk us through that?
I was. Gosh, such a challenge becoming a customer, but something that was necessary. I had gone to a Riley Velocity conference, God, 2013, I think. And I'd finally pulled my head up from being on call on the online platform called GoToMeeting.com. I was working in it and always just getting called and not sleeping. And so I finally got my head up to meet more people, see the community, look at tools, and everything I looked at, that specific tool drew things out visually in what's called the application map and allowed people to dig in, including myself, into transactions and start troubleshooting and finding where issues were. Not they were intentional, but humans write code, code gets bugs. And especially when you start distributing things out into microservices and other things where teams just aren't aware of what other teams are doing. So in the center where my team was, we needed visibility into what was going on. And we had some things, but it just wasn't enough. Um, so I championed that, and the tool eventually got purchased against one of the competitors, and we put it in, and it just started solving problems and gave me something I could teach with so I could scale, move on, and actually make relationships in the platform better. So one day I was going through the contract to understand what do we have, what do we need, and I saw a couple lines in there about marketing agreements and I'm like, oh, we have less than a year to figure out how to meet these marketing agreements to actually meet our contracts. I told my boss, I was like, hey, I want to go speak. And I talked to my sales rep, Tom, and somehow I think Tom linked you and I up, and you started helping me on my speech. And it was a little scary to be standing up on stage in front of a bunch of people. Most of my speaking experience was in college. But I knew I wanted to continue to evolve my career, evolve myself, and find a way to give a piece of myself away to the community and to the world. And so you and I talked and decided that, yeah, we'll keep it techy, but we'll make it a little maybe less boring and put thought leadership principles in there of how was I successful? What were some of the principles that I was successful getting to where I was in my career that others could follow? Um, and I had been practicing with my team, so I had been seeing that those types of principles were successful. And once I spoke about it, they really started practicing them, and their careers have just accelerated.
Yeah,
Um,
just one quick thing for for the listeners. I was what's called a tech evangelist at that time. That's why we got paired up. So it might be called DevRel, developer advocate. There's various different titles, but my title was tech evangelist, and so my job was basically to go around speaking at tech conferences about like modern technology and things that were relevant to the company I was working for. So I, at that point, had a lot of experience with the public speaking thing. And for anyone who was being brought on for the user conference, we were getting paired up with folks so that we could help make sure that their presentations were going to be good presentations, because it's not a skill that you're just born with. You're not born with knowing how to create a presentation and to do public speaking and have a good presentation that people are interested in. So that's why we got paired up initially. And like we started talking, we had meetings once every couple of weeks, probably early on. And then it got much more
mhm.
frequent as we got towards the show itself. Right. And then you came out with this great presentation. Right. I remember, us refining it together. and you pouring yourself into it. There was a point where it started out like
Mhm.
very technical, and then it transitioned into something that was Spencer. It was like Spencer sharing a piece
Yeah.
of himself.
Yeah, you helped make me feel comfortable to do that and taught me how to get photos and pictures and stretch them across the entire slide and just speak from my heart. And so that changed everything. So it was no longer reading slides, it was speaking my mind, my heart, my experience, and just connecting with people. So
Oh, by the way, if
it
you're
was
listening right
definitely,
now, Spencer's giving a really good tip here. So, good presentations usually don't have many words on slides. There's almost none. Like, so you can't read a slide. You have to actually know the material, right? And the slide itself is just there to be to create some sort of emotional response from the person listening
mhm.
to what is hopefully a good story that you're telling them, filled with wonderful lessons.
Well, not only did I think it create emotional response for the people in the crowd, it would trigger me with an emotional response. So then I would speak.
Yeah.
So it was just really strange and great connection. And I've been able to use that skill and actually pay it forward and teach other people how to do it also throughout my career.
So tell me a little
So
bit
yeah,
about
I'm very thankful.
the presentation itself. Tell me a little bit. You had some really good lessons in there. Can you just do a really quick recap? Let's say a 1 to 2 minute recap on what the heck was in that presentation that was so valuable to you and a lot of other people.
Absolutely. So yeah, it was like I said, it was giving away those pieces of myself. Like how was I successful? And we both went through and we found some alliteration and spent a lot of time looking through thesaurus and finding words. So, I mean, I settled on five P's. I had like seven or eight, but you only have so much time in a presentation. So you taught me to condense things down a little bit. And the first one was passion. Like, how do you take your passion? And I remember having a slide of a guy pulling his hair out. And how do you take your frustration and passion and lack of sleep or whatever it is when you're trying to help the world have better technology and pour that in instead of just getting frustrated, pour it into driving results and changes, like stepping into the driver's seat and being okay with stepping outside of what your role or job description is and push forward. I remember one of them was positivity, just like you can take all the negativity, and if you kind of focus on that, you're just going to manifest negativity around you. So how do you stay positive no matter what? Realize that no one's really out to get you most of the time, but
Most of the time.
but just
So
be
actually,
positive most of the time.
this is interesting, by the way, those two things together, right? So when you talk about passion, man, I think we all have passion at some point in our lives, right? We're all, especially early on in our careers, there's a lot of passion. But that passion actually can quickly turn into negativity if let's say we're not allowed to do some of the things that we want to. Let's say we think we have a really good idea and someone says no, right? Like, how many times has that happened? It's happened a lot for me in my career where I'm like, we should do this. And other people are like, no, we shouldn't. And maybe there's some really good reasons why you shouldn't do that right now. Right. There's
Yeah.
more
Well, I
information that
mean,
you might not have that passion is just driving you forward. So it might not be the right time. So, being able to stay positive in the face of adversity, that's like, and keep that passion flowing. You put those two things together and you can create something special, I think.
yeah, and that kind of leads into a couple more of my points in that speech, which was persistence. So like
Mm.
not giving up if maybe the timing is off. And so you can put that into your idea vault, what I call the idea vault. Just write it down somewhere, remember it, and look for another chance. Like, don't necessarily give up. Come back to it. Sometimes the organization or the technology, the challenges, or there'll be an outage or something that happens. And that's the moment to bring that back up. Not in it, being cautious that you're not throwing people's faces, but finding new ways to introduce that and taking data and bringing that to the table so that that idea can come out of the vault and actually come to life using your passion and positivity. But also, that leads into partnerships, whereas sometimes two are better than one, three or four. Rallying people around a problem, like I know managing people throughout the towards the backside of my career, I always found when you put more people in a room on a team, even if they were a virtual team, man, just amazing stuff would come out. You wouldn't have to direct very heavy, empower them, guide them, but bringing them together and then partnering or just partnering with other people to solve a problem. I mean, at Citrix, when we had a problem with GoToMeeting, it was like the join time was just jumping up astronomically, sometimes like 60 minutes for one session. The person was gone, but the system was still processing and running. But I mean, the average time for somebody to get in was still seconds, not down in the milliseconds. I think we eventually got it down to 5 milliseconds per on average, or for the max, actually. Um, I really believe in looking at the max data point. We can jump into another session on that because that's I could go on forever
Yeah.
on theology or thought process. But
By the way,
definitely partnering with.
this whole
Go ahead.
partnering thing that you're talking about, you're speaking my language here. Like building coalitions, building a groundswell. I gave a talk one time at DevOps Days. I think it was in Atlanta. I think it was DevOps Days Atlanta. Like again, probably a decade ago. And one of the biggest things people wanted to know was how do we get this DevOps thing moving forward? And I gave a talk about culture, and culture meaning you have to build a group of people who want to change things. You have to bring those people together that all have this similar interest and want to move in a similar direction. And I've done that kind of all through my career, and it's been like that when you when you have multiple people working together to push, it makes it a lot easier, right? You distribute that workload,
Absolutely.
but it also amplifies the passion, right? Everyone's passions amplify each other's. And that's when you achieve great things. So for me, this is like a huge point is really bring people together in partnership.
Well, and it doesn't have to be in the silo of just engineering. I mean, I learned to go get customer service people that were on the front end of the customers complaining and being angry, and the marketing and sales people that were losing deals, and understanding that acquiring a new customer is really expensive, like learning what a CAC ratio was. And then
Yeah,
understanding from a core development perspective, like what was going on and what was the business pushing them to do to produce new things, and how do you balance what gets released versus over how things are reliable from a DevOps or reliability perspective. And so there's a lot of give and take, and to do that and understand that you really have to partner and get outside of your shell where you're at, your cube, your desk, your home, wherever,
sure.
virtually, physically. And the last one is patience. And so just being able to take a breath, being okay with it taking time. This joint meeting problem, it took 3 years to solve.
Wow.
And it took
Wow.
tools coming in. So it wasn't like uber focus all the time, 3 years, but just pattern recognition over time. And
I'm
then
sure it was
finally
getting
finding
better over
someone.
time, just like until to a
Well,
point. Yeah, go ahead.
the funny thing it was, and then all of a sudden it wasn't. A release went out and it just shot up
Oh,
crazy.
man. Yeah.
And so that was actually the opportunity to pull everything out of the idea vault and say, hey, I know the piece of code that needs to be changed. Nothing else should really go out because this is so bad. Everyone's focused on trying to fix it. Literally, here's the fix.
Yeah.
Please try it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sure enough, everything just coalesced.
Timing.
Um,
Timing is so important,
timing,
right?
timing.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so those 5 Ps, people that worked for me and other people from the conference started using them and kept in contact with me, and I kept getting feedback and calls from them saying, "Oh my God, you helped me so much," and that made my heart feel good because I always want to leave places better than I found them. And then, and we got I don't and we talked about coffee and different things and whiskey on
Yeah.
our calls, and you kept driving me to get things done because we were both really really busy
Yeah.
trying to do our normal
We
jobs
both
on
had day
top of
jobs
do
that we had to get
this.
done. Yeah.
And then for some reason, I'm like, you know what? I want to do another speech at AppSphere, which is the first big user conference for App Dynamics that was in Vegas. And I was slated for a breakout room. And 2 weeks before the conference was about to start, the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer at App Dynamics, calls me. He's like, you know, I like what we see in your slides. I think it aligns with our purpose. What do you think about doing a main stage talk?
Yeah.
I took a deep breath. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, it's a great opportunity, but woo,
You've been promoted to the
like
main
that's.
stage, sir. Yeah.
I'm like, well, I have one ask. I need Jim. I want to spend more time with Jim, and I know he has the partnership that I need to be successful to represent myself, the world, and the company on the big stage.
You just wanted to
So
talk
off
about
we went.
coffee with me again and whiskey.
Well, that and whiskey. Now I know tequila, so
And tequila. Yeah.
we have some side conversations about tequila now.
Yeah.
I've got some good ones to tell you to try. Um, so yeah, and so off I went preparing this speech again, and this one had five F's.
So all right, we moved to the
Ultimately,
from the
culminating
P's to the F's.
P's
Alliteration.
to the
I like
F's.
it. It's easier.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
easier to
yeah. It
remember.
helps remember it.
Yeah.
Helps remember it. You can tie things back
Is it really
together.
alliteration? I'm not sure if it's alliteration or not.
Oh, it may not be, but
Yeah,
it
I
sounds
know.
like it is to
We're
us. I
both in
mean,
tech. We really don't know English very well. Like that's usually a requirement for being good at tech is you're not very good at English or grammar.
English and
Grammar.
math weren't my strongest subjects, but somehow I wound up in tech and
Right.
successful.
So
So
there
the
were
last one there was five F's, and the
yeah.
last one was forgiveness. I'm going to start there, and that was realizing that you get this protagonist antagonist relationships when you're working. At least I've always experienced that,
Yeah.
especially when you're working up against hard problems, deadlines, and the stress of the software as a service platform, life changes to production and learning in production because sometimes there is no other place with the skill or the setup. I hope that's changed now because testing and production is not fun. But learning to, no matter what kind of personas you butt heads with, how do you just let go and see them as a human being and that it's just part of life and not hold grudges or that was a big learning for me. I felt like I wanted to drop off on that stage, but I do remember that experience of stepping up on that stage and looking out at the crowd of like over 800 people in the auditorium inside the God, where were we at? Cosmopolitan, like where big names had played. And I stepped up there and looked down, I'm like, oh my God, there's like three screens behind me.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the crowd just disappeared because I was prepared
Yeah.
and I was able just to talk from my heart and give away these points.
So hang on a second. Forgiveness. I like how you started kind of at the end here. What I want to do is I want to save the other F's for the next one, for the next episode.
All right.
Okay. So you gave us 5 P's for this episode. Cool. You gave away one of your F's. But yeah,
Just a little
it's a really
teaser.
important F. Like forgiveness is tough, it's difficult. God, I know that when I think about my work life, there's always been people that have disagreed with me, and that's okay. And there's been barriers in my way. And I've very rarely, quite honestly, come across people who I think enjoyed being a jerk for the sake of being a jerk, right? So I think it happens, yeah. But for the most part, people are doing their jobs, right? And they're just they are people just like you and me. And I'm probably that person to someone else, right? That's when you think about it, almost certainly you, if you're in a role that has to make any sort of decision, you're probably going to be that person that someone else needs to forgive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I would sometimes call rollbacks on code because it was taking too long to fix it and stuff was down and people would get angry at me.
yeah, yeah.
It was part of the job.
Well, I'm not sure if we've mentioned this yet, but you were in that SRE role. You were in that troubleshooting role of trying to make stuff work. Like you were responsible for end to end performance of very important
Performance,
systems.
availability of the entire platform end to end.
Yeah. Yeah. So of course people are trying to get their new code out and you're like, no, we're taking too long here. We got to go refactor that. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna leave the five Fs for next time. Let's talk about us meeting for the first time in Vegas, right?
Oh
So
God.
yeah, remember
Oh
as
yes.
we were prepping, we
So
were like, we're gonna meet in Vegas and we're gonna get coffee together, right? And we're like, I don't know who, it was probably me who had the brilliant idea that we should do a very early morning coffee appointment,
the
right? We're gonna
day
go,
after my speech,
yeah, we're gonna go find amazing coffee in downtown Vegas, not on the strip. This was like a place that was legit, really good coffee, had won awards and
did,
stuff. I think like
I was about
one
to
of
say,
their
didn't the barista
barista,
just win an award? Yeah.
yeah, but barista had won a barista competition and their coffee was like top notch. This was a really good place. And I think it was me who was stupid enough to be like, we should go early in the morning in Vegas because
Well,
we won't be
if it
sleepy at
if it was the
all.
day before my speech, it would have been good because
Yeah.
I had to wait a whole day to experience Vegas and just be 100% good. I was coached to do that, so I'd be ready for my speech the next day. And so I did let a little loose that night after my speech. I mean, it was a lot to celebrate,
Yeah.
and
It's also,
we
I
wound
mean,
up
there
at
is definitely a release after you give a speech like that. Like you are, you are drained. Like you give away a lot of yourself on stage. I'm not sure, you know, how many people are familiar with that level of public speaking, but if you're really doing it right, you're going to emote a lot on stage. You're going to give away a lot. And leading up to that, you were probably making changes to your presentation right up until you walked on stage, almost certainly, if someone allowed you
only
to.
in my head because
Okay.
I wasn't allowed to
Ah,
touch it. So
yeah.
when I landed, I
Mhm.
uploaded my presentation. It was supposed to be due way before that, but when I landed, I was on the plane on my phone Wi-Fi, sending it in, and then that was it. I wasn't allowed to touch it.
Yeah.
But most of it was pictures, so it was all in my head. So I mean, I spent trying to be in the conference the first day and also meditating a lot. So I was just ready, nervous system calm, so I could actually deliver that message from my heart to the crowd.
Yeah. So I want to talk about this story a little bit because you got finished presenting. You went off and did your thing. You gave a great presentation, of course. This was a main stage thing, huge screens behind you. You're done. You're exhaling. All right, I'm done. Normally, what happens after that is you have a beverage or two, and that might turn into more. And then I know we're meeting the next day. I texted you. I'm like, hey, buddy, I'm on my way. I got this Uber and I'm meeting you down at the bottom of the Cosmo. I was staying someplace else. I'll meet you at the bottom of the Cosmo. We pull up and you come walking out and you get in the Uber and I gotta be honest with you, you look a little rough, right? You're looking a
Oh, I'm
little
sure my skin was a little green. I was dizzy.
you're, you're looking a little worse
Yeah,
for
the
the
night
wear.
just kept developing because, yeah, as soon as I stepped off the stage, someone handed me a drink. And it was like I was on an endorphin high to begin with from that and drank some. I didn't get belligerent, but the night went on. We wound up at a nightclub dancing away. And I remember all of a sudden I had no idea what time it was, and the club shut down, and we were going out the door, and the door opens, and all of a sudden the sunlight's like, whoa! I'm like, oh no!
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I got to meet with Jim soon, and I've had a little too much to drink, and so somehow the CTO of Toyota and I wound up in the restaurant in the Cosmo eating breakfast. I was trying to feed him. He was not in good shape, and I wasn't in good shape. And it was really hard to eat, but I got a little food in and then met you because I was so excited about that. And I was like, what have I done? I almost was beating myself up inside. He was like, you know what? Just make the best of it. And we got in an Uber or a taxi. I don't remember what it was, but it was a bumpy ride, a little warm inside.
For you.
And we
For
got
you,
there for
buddy.
me. Exactly, exactly. I'm the one over here sweating. You're like,
Yeah.
hopefully we make this. And it was just an amazing experience. We walk in and it smelled so good, and they had baked goods, and the coffee was fantastic, and the friendship. We got to actually talk and catch up. And I have searched on the strip for a good cup of coffee for years, and I have the closest thing I found was in I think the Win, and it was a very expensive cup of coffee. You had to buy a
Yeah.
pot
Yeah.
of press, but it still wasn't even good. This was a good cup of coffee.
Yeah. This was what it should be, right? This is a real legit coffee shop. Good place. Yeah. I remember that. Um, I remember walking in there and it's just the smells. Yes, you know, when you walk in and you smell good coffee, you're like, oh yeah, this is going to be great. And it was.
Yeah, well, and there was natural wood and live edges. It just the whole environment experience was fantastic.
It was good. So that was fun. We had a good time. And then we got back to kind of normal life after that. But I think you ended up being part of our sales playbook, right? Didn't you? Did you end up in the sales
I
playbook
did.
for?
I didn't know for a long time. I would meet people for App Dynamics later on in my career. Like, oh my God, you're a legend. I remember you. Like, what are
You're
you talking about?
legendary.
Like, you were in our trainings. And yeah, it was all around, from what I understand. You can probably talk more to this since I think you helped build it. But it was all around like, how do you take someone, help them grow, be more confident in themselves, and then help them find solutions that actually will drive a business forward if there's value in a sale,
Yeah.
and not just selling them something and walking away. And that was one of the things that touched my heart about working with that company the most, was the people were invested and I built relationships throughout the company all the way to the top. And when I needed something, or something was, I could give product feedback, or even give, I mean, even on when I spoke in Vegas the last day, I walked away with an award for thought leadership, not just for my piece that did the speech, but helping shape the way the product ran for the next several years, and what was on the roadmap. Because with those relationships, providing feedback, I was able to articulate what is needed in the industry, what's the lack, like
Yeah.
what not what are you seeing from just what an executive is telling you, but what are you seeing from a person that needs to use the tooling and communicate the issues to drive things forward.
Yeah. So I think this is a really important point. Most people, no, let's not say most people, many people that I've bumped into in the tech world almost have an adversarial type of relationship when it comes to salespeople and people who are on the vendor side. They have product and they're trying to engage
Right.
in conversations. Product, yeah, not crack, right? Software crack.
Well, I just think it's funny because you said sides. I mean, there's not really sides. That's
Oh, yeah, and that's
division.
the thing, though, right? Because there shouldn't be sides. And look, I was a technologist who worked on the buyer side of software. I was kind of like you, Spencer. I was out in lots of different companies using monitoring tools, developing my expertise, became an architect, and I had to purchase lots of tooling in order to help make all of our software better, because ultimately as a company we wanted to make that software perform faster and more reliable for our customers, right? That's what it was about for us. And there were a lot of great companies out there that we could have potentially worked with. And that role that I had was to vet those different companies and kind of whittle it down to a few different contenders and then work with those sales teams. And those, what I realized going through the process was the salespeople that I was dealing with, the really good ones, they really, truly, genuinely wanted to help me solve my problems. And you could
Mhm.
tell who were the really good ones versus the not so good ones, because the really good ones, they listen well. They listen, they take notes, they're invested in your outcome. And then eventually I started to work on the vendor side of things and got to see in many ways how standoffish certain people could be, that didn't, in my opinion, they didn't look at the process in the right way. And what I mean by that is they would, like, you would ask them questions and try and help understand their use cases and who else are they looking at, so that you can provide more details or say, hey, look, here's how we think we compare to that other company. Go ask them the same thing. And these are the things that we offer. These are some things we don't offer that they offer, right? Like good salespeople should be very honest about what they can or cannot do for you. And there's a lot of people who just won't engage at that level in that in building a relationship. And what's crazy about this is that if they engage in the way you engaged, right, you were truly engaging in like a partnering type of engagement. If they engage in that way, they will have a whole company of people trying to make their career better, trying to lift them up because we're all successful together. Either it works together or we're all going to fail together. And that, like, nobody wants to fail. And we all want to succeed. We want to help, like on the vendor side, our company genuinely wanted to help you solve problems.
Yeah.
There was really a bunch of people who had been in the same situation like me. Plus, yeah, we're a software company. If you solve your problems, you keep buying our software, and that keeps us all employed, right? Just like any other company, right? You were working for a company that sold your software to other people. And the better
Yep.
you did for them, the more likely they were to keep buying your software and solving their own problems, happily paying you to solve their problems. So we all benefit in the long run.
Well, and it was a part of skill too. I mean, that's one of the things. It's still there's several companies out there I've now worked around that just want to build everything versus buy. And it's not just a cost thing or an in-house thing, but this partnership you're talking about was a very good example of how all of these people and experts from all the industry came together to help morph and build things and implement things in a way that would help solve my problems when there was no budget to add extra headcount to do that. Right? So there was a way to get CapEx budget, but not the other kind. So not OpEx.
Yeah.
And it really was, to me, it was showing just how different things could be if you think about them that way.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Spencer. We talked about a lot today, and it's been fun reminiscing, but we're out of time for today's session. So we're going to wrap this right here. Remember, next time we're going to talk about those 5 F's. Spencer's going to bring us those 5 F's to complement the 5 P's that he discussed today. We're also going to discuss some whiskey and coffee tasting. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We'll go a little bit deeper into that. I had tequila today, but it's going to be coffee or whiskey. One of those two for me next week. We'll see.
I heard whiskey.
You,
I heard whiskey.
you,
That's probably what I'm bringing.
maybe we'll
Spoiler alert, I'm
switch.
bringing
Maybe we'll
whiskey.
switch. I don't know. You brought coffee today. I'll go next week. Right. And then I'm also going to talk to Spencer about how I was able to network my whole house without using Wi-Fi and without Ethernet runs as well. And this, my inner geek
What?
loves, yeah, my inner geek is just exposing himself right now. That sounded wrong, but I'm sorry.
Luckily we're on camera and there's nothing funny happening. So.
My inner geek is raising his hand and saying yes. Yeah, that was fun. It was a lot of fun, actually, that little project. So I think it'll be a good discussion. I hope you all will join us for that. And so till then, have a great day and be good to each other. We'll talk to you later.